Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Hidden Human Story Radio with your host, Rita Jean Moran. Today is Sunday, September 15, 2013. And I've been having some technical difficulties with the show, so I'm going to try a music song and see if we can hear that. All right. That sounds pretty good. So, right. Well, today, like I said, is Sunday, September 15th, 2013. And start off with, I really hope you guys can hear me because it's a little different. But anyway, we'll start off with my announcement that my new book is out. Father God Zeus. Put a lot of work into this, and I'm trying to go into more detail about the ancient people that came out of Crete and civilized the world. And it's got a lot of good information in it, and it's part of my Hidden Human Story series. I've got a lot of quotes from ancient texts, as well as getting a little deeper into who God is and who Satan is. And looking at some symbolism as well to corroborate that theory. And I go into other mythologies around the world to describe what happened to this man and his family. And pretty much you could start off with some of the Greek mythology and get a pretty good idea of how things started, and then continue on with the Nordic mythology, because Zeus is Odin, and you can get an idea of what happened to him in the end. And his travels are also described in Aztec and Mayan and Incan and Native American stories, as well as Polynesian. Hinduism as well. So get a copy of the book, and you'll get a lot of more information that you don't get in school. I just want to start off, before I get going with today's show, stating that I'm really not part of anybody's cult. I'm not interested in being part of anybody's cult, and I'm not pushing anything. These conclusions that I am giving and the books that I'm writing are based on the research I've done over dozens of years, and my interpretation of the facts. And my theory is the mythological unification theory, and it's based on the commonality of the myths and writings globally of a murdered son, and what came and what happened before and after all of that. I use comparative mythology, ancient writings, and comparative anthropology and comparative archaeology to come to my conclusions. And you may not like what I'm presenting, and that's fine. You can go your way if you don't care for it. But I'm going to be honest in what I see as what happened in the past, and you may not like it, but that's just the way it is. So let's start with the show. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about ancient mythologies of Sumer and Crete. But before I begin, I want to talk about a remarkable man who I kind of consider myself like, but not quite, but same kind of ideas. His name was Henrik Schliemann. Now, like myself, Henrik believed the ancient writings and mythologies of Greece were talking about real people and real events and real places. And he set out to find the mythological city of Troy. And the guy actually found it. Now, basically from Wikipedia, the Trojan War consisted of a war between the Greeks and the Trojans. And the Trojans resided in what is now Turkey. The war originated with a quarrel between the goddesses Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite. Now, what started it was the goddess Eris, who is a goddess of strife and discord, gave them a golden apple, and it's known as the apple of discord, and it was marked for the fairest. Now, Zeus sent the goddesses to Paris. Now, Paris was a Trojan man, and he was to decide who was the fairest amongst the goddesses. He judged that Aphrodite was the fairest and that she should receive the apple. In exchange, Aphrodite made Helen, the most beautiful of all the women, but who was married to Menelaus, fall in love with Paris, and he took her to Troy. Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, and the brother of Helen's husband, Menelaus, led an expedition to Troy and took over the city for 10 years because of Paris's insult. After the death of many heroes, including Achilles and Ajax and Hector and Paris, the city fell to the ruse of the Trojan horse. The Greeks slaughtered the Trojans, except for some women and children who they kept or sold as slaves, and they desecrated the temples, thus earning the gods' wrath. Few of the Greeks, or Achaeans as they're called, returned safely to their homes, and many founded colonies in distant shores. The Romans later traced their origin to Aeneas, who was one of the Trojans, and he was said to have led some of the surviving Trojans to modern-day Italy. That was written about in the Aeneid, written by the Roman scholar Virgil. Now, in Greco-Roman mythology, Aeneas, like I said, was a Trojan hero, and he was the son of Prince Anchises, and the goddess Aphrodite. His father was a second cousin of King Priam of Troy, making Aeneas Priam's second cousin, once removed. He is a character in Greek mythology, and he is mentioned in Homer's Iliad and receives full treatment in Roman mythology as the legendary founder of what would become ancient Rome, like I said, per Virgil's Aeneid. Okay. Now, according to some other mythologies, Romulus and Remus, who came later, they were the descendants of Aeneas through the mother Rhea Sevilla and the god Mars, or Ares. And they were said to have founded the city of Rome. The Julian family, like as in Julius Caesar of Rome and Augustus, traced their lineage to Ascanius and Aeneas, thus to the goddess Aphrodite, or Venus. So, and remember, her symbol is the dove, and that's another symbol you'll see. Now, through these Julian royalty came the original kings of Britain, or England, and that was through a grandson of Aeneas named Brutus. And through that bloodline came King Arthur. And that went all the way up to about a little bit over 1,000 years ago, until a new bloodline came in through William the Conqueror. And his bloodline is the kings of Tara and the Scottish kings and queens and the Celtic kings that came from this Aeneid bloodline. And I will get into that in a later show because that is a usurper bloodline. And William the Conqueror was basically illegitimate, and he had Jewish backing. Who his mother was kind of secrecy. That's a story for another day. Okay, now the ancient Greeks believed the Trojan War was a historical event that had taken place in the 13th or 12th century BC. And that's about 3,200 years ago, and I think it went back a lot further, but that's also a discussion for another day. And like I said, Troy was located in modern-day Turkey. Now, Henrik Schliemann, he was a German amateur archaeologist, and in the 1800s, and he met a Frank Calvert, and the two of them discussed where they thought this lost city of Troy was. And Henrik Schliemann was going off of the descriptions in the Iliad and the Odyssey to try and figure it out. So they started to go back and forth of where they thought it was, and began to work together a bit. Okay. Let's see what else I can tell you. Now, Henrik Schliemann wasn't born rich. His father was like a pastor, and got accused of something, and then kind of devastated the family. But Henrik Schliemann went on. He worked a lot of menial jobs for a while, and he figured out how to be a good investor and businessman, and he became pretty rich. And at an early age, I can't remember, I think he was 8, he decided after reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, he was going, Homer's Iliad, he was going to find Troy. And after he'd made himself rich and he was married and had some kids, he was ready to go and do it. His wife didn't want to go with him. He ended up divorcing her and marrying someone else who knew how to speak Greek, and went off to find Troy. Now, he was working with some dynamite, and nowadays, that would be a big no-no in the field of anthropology or archaeology, but we're talking about over 100 years ago, and the field was pretty new. But he had dynamited some areas to get at the bottom, and he started to find Troy, or what he thought was Troy. And there were multiple layers to this area, and they correspond to different time periods. And he actually found some treasures, and the government of Turkey wanted a cut of it, but he was able to keep some of it. And some of it went to a museum in Germany, and after World War II, the Russians stole that. And some of those treasures are now in Russia. Also, by the end of his life, after all of his studying, Henrik Schliemann was able to speak English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, Polish, Italian, Greek, Latin, Russian, Arabic, and Turkish, as well as German. So that shows you how determined he was.
Okay, archaeologists today, know that he came pretty close to finding the real Troy. So he pretty much proved it out. He wanted to also go and find the ancient labyrinth in Crete, and he never got to do that. He ended up dying before he got that far. So, the bottom line was, people thought that this guy was just a nut, and that these ancient mythologies were just stories and, for morals, and that's all it was. Well, just like myself, the guy as a child had a gut feeling that it wasn't just a story and that it was in fact based on something that actually happened. And he was smart enough to get himself in a position where he could financially get what he needed and go out and prove that there was still some evidence, or there was some evidence that this city and this war actually happened. So I salute this guy. He did a great job. I mean, it was primitive and all that, but he pretty much worked very hard, and he learned all of these things and all of these languages, and to do what he had to do. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the family tree of Italy. That's very interesting as well. Like I said, Aeneid, who is the son of Venus and Anchises, he went over, he had to leave Troy, and he went over to Italy. And his story is an interesting one. I will get into that in a later show. But he ended up, he met Queen Dido, who fell in love with him, but he had to leave her because a vision from the gods and goddesses told him that wasn't his destiny. He had to go further into Italy and settle there. And his bloodline, which is interesting, goes down to Rhea Silvia, which supposedly was impregnated by the god Mars. Now that's a long, timeline. There's like multiple generations between Aeneid and this Rhea Silvia, over like 10 generations. And, I don't know if it was really Mars who impregnated her, or a priest of Mars. Again, if the guy really was still around, they had some kind of a long lifespan compared to the average human. I'm kind of leaning towards a priest of Mars or something like that, or a relative. But that she gave birth to Romulus and Remus, and we'll get into that. The kings of Rome and how they went into Spain, and they went into England. The kings and queens of Ireland came from Egypt with Queen Scotia and King Miles, and we'll get into that in a later show. Now, so that is the lost, my discussion on the lost city of Troy. I want to talk about ancient Sumer. Okay, now, Sumer was supposed to have been, according to Wikipedia, the land of the civilized kings. And that area has a lot of history, a lot of empires that came and have gone. What's interesting is the interest of the Sumerian, Akkadian, cuneiform texts that were found in the Library of Ashurbanipal in 1800s, because they have quite a bit of texts that they found that have a lot of ancient
mythology that is similar to all the rest of some mythologies as you begin to compare them. And, in some history books, they basically state Sumer goes back to about 5500 BC would be the oldest inscribed tablet of Uruk in Sumerian, but they know that people lived there over 9,000 years ago. And Sumerian was, or cuneiform was the language they used, which was adopted by the Akkadians and modified. And that area is ancient Iraq. And that area became, it had several city-states, and one of them became Babylon. So it's at they say Mesopotamia, but it's really Iraq. It's ancient Iraq. And, it was, like I said, multiple kingdoms. It was Sumerian to Akkadian to Assyrian. And then the Phoenicians arose about 3,200 years ago. Tyre, in that period, that was more like, off of, I guess would be like Syria in that area. And Damascus, is next in Syria is next to it. But the Assyrians then turned into the Babylonians, and then they had to deal with the wars between, the Jews came in and out, and then the Persians and the Greeks, and then they turned into Iraq. And look what we have now, pretty much taken over again. But, so we have multiple kingdoms, like I said, Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian, and Iraqian. But they try to maintain a lot of their mythology. And this Ashurbanipal was Akkadian, and or he had things written in Akkadian, but he was he was very interested in preserving these stories. So he collected these stories and had all of these clay tablets made and in his library. And this was discovered, and there was actually another library too in the area. But when that area was sacked, they burnt like that temple, but they didn't destroy the tablets. They in fact glazed them like you would in a potter's kiln, and it actually preserved those tablets. So people were able to find them, but the people that found them sent them back to England and mixed them all up, so they don't know which part. Like I said, there were two libraries in the area. They don't know exactly which one it came from, but I'm sure there's quite a bit of tablets that haven't been translated. Some have, but there's probably a whole lot more that we don't know. What is going on in a British museum. Now, the Sumerian Akkadian gods have been pretty much made popular by a guy named Zacharias Sitchin. He's claiming that he was able to decipher them, and he wrote quite a few books, but his theory is these were aliens that came to Earth and handed down the kingship. I've read his books, and I kind of bought into that for a while. But when I really started to get into a lot of these other ancient texts and my mythological unifications there, I took a step back. And Zacharias Sitchin was not the first person to decipher these cuneiform tablets. One of the main people that did it was a guy named Dr. Samuel Noah Kramer, who came before his time and wrote multiple books on the subject and what those texts said. And Samuel Noah Kramer, like I said, he was born in 1897 and he died in 1990. And he was one of the world's leading Assyriologists and a renowned expert on Sumerian history and Sumerian language. And he was born in Russia. And I think the guy was Jewish, but he immigrated to America. Yeah, he was Jewish. He immigrated to America because of the pogroms under Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. And by the way, that's a separate subject, what was going on in Russia. That could be a subject for another day. You can also do some research on that. But they left, and he enrolled in school in Philadelphia and went on to earn his PhD in 1929. And he became very interested in this Mesopotamian culture. So he deciphered many of these cuneiform tablets, and he wrote many books, including Samuel Noah Kramer's Sumerian Mythology, Study of Spiritual and Literary Achievements in the Third Millennium BC, written in 1944, way before Zechariah Sitchin, who was born in 1920, kind of almost like the same time, really, but and died in 2010. But, Sitchin was born 30 years later, but, he wrote all these books way before Zechariah Sitchin wrote his books. Now, Kramer also wrote History Begins at Sumer, 39 First in Man's Recorded History, The Sumerians, the History, Culture, and Character. He wrote Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, and In the World of Sumer, an autobiography. His translation and interpretation is very different from Zechariah Sitchin, and I would tend to lean towards what he wrote because Zechariah Sitchin made all kind of interpretations about spaceships and a Neberu, and that's not really in here. And like I said, I took a step back from everything that I had learned or read from Sitchin. I have a completely different point of view based on my research of other cultures and their writings, and what I see fits in with what I've been saying about this family out of Crete. Now, the gods listed for the Sumerian accounting gods, had Namu and Anu, which is the mother goddess, and the sky god. It's equivalent to Gaia and Uranus. And they have, some gods like Kingu, Tiamat, Abzu, and Enki and Ea, and Lugal, and then they, go on to, sometimes they'll talk about Enlil, but Dumuzi, he's the murdered god, just like Osiris, and Gilgamesh would be Heracles. Inanna and Ishtar, that one really threw me when I first read the Zechariah Sitchin books, but after going back and backing up and looking at everything, that would be your equivalent of Aphrodite. And Enlil would be Kronos. Enki is Zeus. And Ninursag is Demeter. And on and on. So there are stories that Dumuzi or Tammuz had relations with Inanna. They had children together. That's the equivalent of Dionysus and Aphrodite. They had children together. They were, consorts. So that fits in perfectly well. There's also a story of Enki and the seduction of his daughters, and Ninursag getting angry, and he gets sick over it. That is pretty much Zeus and and Persephone and Demeter, the same story. Now, what threw me a little bit was there were some stories about Enlil just not really liking humans and didn't care if they died, but they called it Elil, not Enlil. That's in a different, that might have been more Babylonian. And in some of the Greek mythology, that's attributed to Zeus. So that one kind of threw me until I took a look. And, like I said, there's variations in this ancient story across the board. And you've got to look at, who had the son that was murdered. That's the key. That's the key to figuring out who all these gods and goddesses were. And once you look at it from that perspective, everything lines up. It begins to make sense. I want to read a little bit of some of the translations by Dr. Samuel Noah Kramer. Just to give you a little different perspective than the stuff floating around on the internet. So let me see here. See if I can find the one about Dumuzi having a dream that he was going to die. Let's see. Oh, well, let me back up. And by the way, too, Enlil, who would have been Kronos, was the inventor of the pickaxe. It was Enlil who decided how the world was going to be divided up, and Enki executed that. So that would have been Kronos and Zeus. So let me read this from Samuel Noah Kramer. Okay, the Lord that which is appropriate, verily, he caused to appear. And this is from the book Sumerian Mythology, from Samuel Noah Kramer. The Lord whose decisions are unalterable. Enlil, who brings up the seed of the land from the earth, to care to move away heaven from earth. Okay, that's just like Kronos separating Ge and Uranus, the Mother Earth and Father Sky. Took care to move away earth from heaven, in order to make grow the creative which came forth. In the bond of heaven and earth, Nipper he stretched out the. He brought the pickaxe into existence. The day came forth. He introduced labor, decreed the fate. Upon the pickaxe and basket, he directs the power. Enlil made his pickaxe exalted, his pickaxe of gold, whose head is of lapis lazuli, the pickaxe of his house of silver and gold. His pickaxe, whose something, is of lapis lazuli, whose tooth is one-horned ox ascending a large wall. The Lord called upon the pickaxe, decrees its fate. He set the Kindu, the holy crown, upon his head. The head of man he placed in the mold. Before Enlil, man covers his land. Upon his black-headed people he looked steadfastly. The Anunnaki who stood about him, he placed it, the pickaxe, as a gift in their hands. They soothe Enlil with prayer. They give the pickaxe to the black-headed people to hold. All right. You may not like my interpretation, but like I said, I'm gonna just lay it out. This was this Enlil belonged probably to a different type of Caucasoid race. They were much larger than the people of today. And this is basically telling you that they knew about agriculture and farming, and they were doing the work, but they didn't want to do the work. And that's also described in some other writings. So they went out and they got a hold of some other races that were darker races on the planet, and gave them the tools to do the work so the gods did not have to. So you can look at it as enslavement, or you can look at it as civilization. That's your choice. As far as them coming from outer space, or the planet Nibiru and all of that, and Tiamat,
I really don't see anything in other literature that clearly spells that out, although in the Greek literature they do talk about the autoborn, where they weren't, they didn't have to be birthed. Now, that's almost sounding like a cloning process, and that was supposed to be way before these gods and goddesses. So perhaps there was something, I've yet to discover that happened way in the past, before these ancient people out of Crete. But even one of the Aztec codices described a group of larger people that enslaved the ancient Aztecs, and they left by boat. But the fact is that this is describing the enslavement of a different race from this Caucasoid race of gods and goddesses. And if you really don't like that, that's just, you're going to have to go your way. But I'm going to call it as I see it. And I don't believe in any fairy tale about Nabaru and all that. I have to see some kind of proof. And I think the stuff that Zacharias Sitchin did is probably more damaging than good, although he did bring a lot of attention to those texts. So in that sense, that's good. But he didn't give credit to Dr. Samuel Noah Kramer, which he should have done, because this guy did a lot of decipherment, and credit was not given. So I want to read a little bit more here. Cattle and grain. In those days, Enki says to Enlil, Father Enlil, Lahar and Ashnan, they who have been created in the Dulkug, let us cause them to descend from the Dulkug. At the pure word of Enki and Enlil, Lahar and Ashnan descended from the Dulkug. From Lahar, they, Enlil and Enki, set up the sheepfold, plants, herbs, and they present to him. For Ashan, they establish a house. Plow and yoke they present to her. Lahar, standing in his sheepfold. A shepherd, increasing the bounty of the sheepfold is he. Ashnan is standing among the crops. A maid kindly and bountiful is she. Abundance of heaven. Lahar and Ashnan caused to appear. In the assembly they brought abundance. In the land they brought the breath of life. The decrees of the God they direct. The contents of the warehouses they multiply. The storehouses they fill full. In the house of the poor, hugging the dust, and they bring abundance. The pair of them, wherever they stood, bring heavy increase into the house. The place where they stand, they sat. The place where they sit, they supply. They made good the heart of An and Enlil. Now, An is Uranus. Basically, this is telling you, this Caucasoid race grew food and had animals instead of being cannibals like some of the savages that were running around on the planet. And some of the, the other people were hunters and gatherers, and if whatever they could get, they could get. They didn't understand the science of agriculture, and these people did. And they didn't want to do all of the hard work, so they went out and got these black-headed or darker-colored races to do it. And they invented all of the equipment. Now, what came before them, I don't know. When we get into Crete, we'll talk about how the evidence of human existence is over 120,000 years. So we'll get into that in a minute. Let's see. There's, like I said, talk about Ninurzag and Enki's affair and the creation of man. Okay. Let's just talk about what was translated by Dr. Samuel Noah Kramer. Okay, here we go. This is the mother of Enki telling him to create a servant. O my son, rise from thy bed, from thy work with what is wise. Fashion servants of the gods, may they produce their... And then cuts off. All right, then it says, Enki gives the matter thought, And he says to his mother, Namu, the primeval sea, "O my mother, the creature whose name thou hast uttered, it exists. Okay, bind upon it the blank of the gods. Mix the heart of the clay that is over the abyss. The good and princely fashioners will thicken the clay. Thou bring the limbs into existence. Ninma, the earth mother goddess, will work above thee, goddess of birth, will stand by thee at thy fashioning. O my mother, decree thou the newborn's fate. Ninma will bind upon it the blank of the gods as man." Okay, here it is. That it tells you that this servant-slave human already was existing on the planet, and they got a hold of it and put their knowledge and image on it, which could mean that they reproduced with it and created a hybrid of Caucasoid and whatever it was, and educated it to be a worker. So as far as like genetic engineering and all that, I don't know. They didn't create it from scratch. It was, this race of workers, it was already on the planet. It was a less intelligent race. It was more of a hunter-gatherer, and they took it and enslaved it. Now I'll continue on. The blank she, Ninma, made into a woman who cannot give birth. Inky, upon seeing the woman who cannot give birth, decreed her fate, destined her to be stationed in the woman house. The blank she, Ninma, made onto one who had no male organs, who has no female organ. Inky, upon seeing him who has no male organ, who has no female organ, to stand before the king, decreed as his fate. Of him whom thy hand has fashioned, I have decreed the fate, have given him bread to eat. Do thou create the fate of him whom my hand has fashioned, do thou give him bread to eat. Okay. There's stories of these giants who would mate with the average human, and the woman would die because the baby was just too big. So, and then, some couldn't give birth. Okay, also the idea of clay, that's your biblical or Abrahamic religion, as well as your Greek mythology. Because Prometheus was said to create a human out of dirt. And the other gods were creating women and endowing them with wisdom, and they were creating other races. So, as far as your alien Anunnaki from Nabaru, I don't buy it. And basically these stories are telling you of a Caucasoid race that went out and enslaved a less intelligent, more wild, more hunter-gatherer race. That's it. And they may have mated with them, or whatever you call it, and a mix of their race and this other creature, whatever you want to call it, was man. Intelligent enough to follow instructions, but not intelligent enough to have created all of this. Now, like I said, Samuel Kramer did not get the credit that he should have gotten. I'm really sick and tired of the Zacharias Sitchin worship. And I think a lot of his stuff was disinfo, quite honestly. There's one of the seals had a hexagram on it, and people were saying that was the sun, and all the little planets, indicated Neberu. Well, no, that represents Saturn, the Chronide bloodline, and all of those little planets are the moons of Saturn. And that was attributed to Enlil. So his little disinfo about that being a pictograph of the sun pretty much takes away from you figuring out what it really was and who they really are. And there's some people I've met that get really vicious if you question the Zacharias Sitchin analysis. And, and there's other people that equate Inky with Satan. That's another one that I can't stand. I've already shown you that Enki is Zeus, and he's the Chronide bloodline, and Satan is Prometheus, Set, Loki, Trickster, and on and on. He is the devil. Zeus is not. Enki is not. So as I go in and I go to all these cultures and whatever writing is left that wasn't burnt, I learn more and more, and I adjust what I know in my writings. But I would say the last book I've written, Father God Zeus, is pretty good. It's got a lot more detail. And at this point, I'm really getting into some of the writings of the Nordic. I think it's Snorri Sturluson. I may have pronounced his last name wrong, but he wrote the Poetic Eddas and the Kings of the Nordics, and he's got a lot of information in there of what happened to Odin, who is Zeus, and all of the Ragnarok situation and the bloodline, and just as Virgil has that bloodline all the way into England, and the Greek scholars have all of the information about the Egyptian pharaohs and the Greeks. So we really want to, take a look at that, and I'm going to get into more of those Aztec codices. Most of the Mayan ones were destroyed. There's only a handful left of those. But the oral traditions are very good, too. Red Horn and so on. Then, look what happened to the Native Americans and how they wouldn't even, with this manifest destiny, wouldn't even let them keep their oral traditions, because they want to, the powers that be don't want you to know whose bloodline is who, and who the real God is and who the real Satan is, and who's running the show, who owns the corporations, and who is behind all of these secret societies and who runs the world. Because if everybody knew that, I think the show would be over. That would be it. But, I'm going to do my best to reveal it, and I know there'll be people that get upset and they don't like what I have to say. Well, you got to move on then. Or maybe another, a later time you'll be able to handle it and understand. So I'm going to move on to the Minoans. Okay, the island of Crete, like I said, was said to have been inhabited by humans for the last 130,000 years. The Minoan civilization was, well, according to Wikipedia, a Bronze Age civilization. Well, it's a lot older than that. They claim that it flourished from 27th century BC to the 15th century BC. Well, I don't buy that. I've heard, that they had pipes for hot and cold water in those houses in Crete. So, that culture goes way back. They also had a bull cult. A bull, as I've said in my earlier shows, was an animal used quite a bit in farming. That's why it was worshipped. It really helped them with the farming, plowing the ground and everything. And Zeus was associated with the bull as the son of Cyrus. And the Cretans would have games where they'd ride the bull. And in the stories of Dionysus, when he was growing up, his childhood friend Ampelos tried to ride a bull and was thrown off and was killed pretty harshly. And in memory of that, Dionysus created wine and named it the vine after Ampelos. What's interesting is there's actually a winery in Ampelos, so that's where that comes from. So again, you'll find that a lot of these companies and a lot of people in Hollywood and a lot of people in the music industry have what you think is an occult symbolism or occult names or logos. This all goes back to this family and these people in from Crete and what they did for the world, and they tend to perverse it. I guess the Church of Satan invert a lot of the Cronide symbology and stories. They'll have a black goat and invert the pentagram. The pentagram, as written about, I think of Theodorus Siculus, I've got to go back and look, it represents many things, and one of those things is the five gods: Zeus as spirit, Athena as air, Hephaestus as fire. Some say Oceanus, the ancient female goddess, is the water. Some might say Poseidon. And then Earth would be Demeter. So when they have, a Wiccan just has a pentagram in a circle, the point is up, and it is to remember these ancient gods and goddesses. It can also be used as a calendar system. Now, when a Satanist inverts it, they'll take it and make it black, and I don't really know who the heck they are invoking, but if they're a Satanist, the top guy would be Set or Prometheus. That would be Satan. So whoever, I guess, is on the other side hanging out with him would be who these people work with. Whereas Wiccan is not working with that. They are working with nature, not against it. Just as the Cronide line was. Okay. Like I said, Gnosis also is famous for the tale of the Minotaur. That one's a strange tale. King Minos was the son of Zeus and Europa, and his wife was cursed by Poseidon because Minos found a white cow or bull that he was supposed to sacrifice to Poseidon, and he didn't. And so he caused Minos' wife to fall in love with this animal and have relations with it. And then she conceived a minotaur from it. And they put this minotaur in a labyrinth built by, I think it was Deus, would be the engineer of King Minos. And because King Minos' son was killed by the Athenians, they would have to send a certain number of boys and girls every so often to be put in this labyrinth and sacrificed to this bull man minotaur. And one day Theseus came, and with the help of King Minos' daughter, who's Ariadne, he was able to kill that minotaur and find his way out and end that practice. And he was supposed to have married Ariadne because she fell in love with him and she helped him. But then he abandoned her on Naxos, and that's where she was found by Dionysus, who married her. You can go back to my earlier shows to re-listen to that story. What's interesting also, Crete is in the Mediterranean, which is right over there next to Egypt and Greece and Italy. So, for those people that don't think that any of the Egyptian pharaohs were white, you need to look at a map and see how close everything was. And you need to understand that the Cretans were seafaring people, and they've been in that area for over 120,000 years. And so, really, it's just not that hard to figure that out. There's, the Cretans. It's interesting. Sometimes you'll hear a statement like, "Don't be a Cretan." That's a cut down, and it probably has to do with ancient rivalries between the Greeks and the Cretans, and going back to King Minos and that whole situation. But it may even go back to Prometheus versus Zeus, because the Greeks think that Prometheus was a creator of man, and Don was a Greek who survived the flood and was the son of Prometheus. So here again, you have some bloodline feuds. The island of Thera is near Crete too, and that's in the Mediterranean. And that's thought to have been Atlantis based on its shape. I'd almost think that that's where Poseidon, the brother of Zeus, was residing. As far as, I definitely think, Atlantis was a global civilization. There's a lot of people that say it's in the Atlantis. No, it was in Thera or Santorini. And some people are even saying it was in South America. Probably was in all those places at one point. And, there could have been a very large island or other parts of coastal land that sunk when the waters, of the ocean raised from the melting of the ice. And that could have happened like thousands of years before these people from Crete were, reintroducing civilization or introducing civilization to the world. We don't know. We only know from what we have in writing until something else is found and properly deciphered. What's interesting is the artwork in a Minoan artwork in Crete. The boys had long hair, and the girls did too. And they are shown in riding the bulls. They're shown in boxing matches. The women, it's interesting to me because they had like multiple skirts on, but then they had like a vest that was open to see the breast. And they had long hair, and they'd put it up in a beautiful hairstyles. Maybe they did that to show the difference between a man and a woman, because they all had long hair, and it's shown as dark, but their skin they're all white, the boys and the girls. And let's see. The women also had what looks to me like an apron on those skirts. Radney, the snake goddess. It's interesting. She's got like multiple layers. And the artwork is, like the colors of the flesh, but they have a lot of blue and red in that artwork, and white, or, black where needed. A little bit of browns. Very interesting. A very distinct art style. Not really like anything I've seen. It's not Egyptian. It's not Greek or any of that. It's just a very different style. And, they had a lot of ceramics and so forth. So, basically, and also, too, their language is still being looked at to be deciphered. They had writing. And it was its own type of script. Okay, so we've talked today about ancient Troy, and we've talked about ancient Sumer and ancient Crete. And I'm trying to show you a different point of view of the past than what you get. And I really don't think the kids today learn anything about some of these ancient writings until, if they're lucky, maybe in high school or college, at a high school or college level. They might get a little bit of some of the basics of mythology, but, no one's really sat down like I'm doing and read, Diodorus Siculus or Nonus or Manetho. Virgil's kind of known, Ovid's kind of known, but Valerius Maximus isn't. And no one, and I guarantee it because I've looked around, in books and internet, and I've been doing this for 30 years, has put this story together like I have done. And I'm showing you the proof. So, if I start to see people saying this, they better not be taking my stuff because I will go after them. But I do want to get this out, so if you like what I'm saying, tell people about it. I want to try and do a better on YouTube and try and make this as clear and as easy to follow, but it's a lot of reading, so most people just don't have time or the drive to sit down and go through these ancient books. But I'm basically showing you the key. I'm showing you the connections. I'm explaining it to you, and I can guarantee you nobody has done this. Nobody has come up with the mythological unification theory. No one sat and figured this out. There are some people that will say that the stories were just repeated from, in the past, that Jesus Christ is really the story of Dionysus. Well, you know what? It's not. Talk about the savior gods. I know I've seen a little bit of that in the conspiracy world, but that's not the same thing as what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure that's disinfo as well. These are bloodlines. These were real people that lived. They lived in very harsh times. There were cannibals everywhere. People were savages. And some of this stuff, like they talk about how they'd kill people and hang parts of their body on a door, and then they'd eat the rest. And this was what was going on in the world at this time. So, these people had to do what they had to do to bring a gentler way of life in. And this came out of Crete. And it came from this Cronide bloodline. And there, like I said, there's variations in the myths. So, for me, I had to interpret it based on comparative mythology and comparative archaeology, comparative anthropology, and comparative symbology or symbolism. That's a big part of it, too. The symbols mean a lot, and they're being, perverse, so you don't understand what happened. So, I really have something that's very unique, and I'm not saying that it's the same story repeated. I see this in a linear fashion. It is the story of bloodlines and what they had to go through. And the kings and queens, the legitimate ones, came from this Cronide bloodline. The Promethean bloodline is a usurper bloodline, and that's just the way it is. The guy didn't do much of anything. He supposedly gave man fire, but Athena had to teach everything else. So, the guy really did nothing, and then he tricked the cousin Osiris, Dionysus, and got him murdered, and then took over the throne and pretended he was the god. So, you'll hear Satanists say that Satan is a god too. Well, that's basically them telling you Lucifer, Prometheus is their god. That's and in the ancient literature he was looked upon as a god. So in that respect, they're not lying. It's just what did the guy do? Nothing, in my opinion, and the guy, took over something he didn't start or conceive of or think of, and he did it by treachery and lying, and basically descendants are in war or conflict with descendants and followers of this Cronide bloodline, and everybody on the YouTube thinks Saturn is Satan. Well, that's not what it is. But we can go into some other stories too. Eventually I'll get into the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls. We'll get into that a little bit more and try and explain this latest Abrahamic religion phenomenon versus the stories that went around for thousands of years about these people and what they had to do and what it was like, for them in this world. So I hope you've enjoyed the show today, and until next time we meet, take care.